We've got 2 weeks to go in the home and away season. I'll tell you what, it's an AFL season that is just getting so on the precipice of teams making the top 4 or the top 8 or missing out altogether. We've got a big 2 weeks coming up. Luke Parker's going to join us from the Swans. They are just travelling beautifully. They're almost assured of a top 4 spot. Sam Edmund's coming in with all the news, but right now it's time for the Bucks Stops here. Bucks, what's your big 5 takeaways?
Well, Gaz, the first thing I've got for you is clearly winning form is the best form. We've got 2 teams in Geelong and Collingwood that have been 10-0, well, 11-0 in their last 11 games, but are clearly out in front when it comes to sides with winning form at the moment. When we're talking about winning form, and what context are we putting in? We're putting it in teams that are over the next 6 or 7 weeks are going to have the capacity to challenge and ultimately win the comp. So Geelong and Collingwood are right up there. The next team in the last 10 weeks that is in the green is Sydney. They've won 8 of their last 10, and they're slowly building their form, and some of their numbers are stacking up. Melbourne on the flip side. Now, despite Melbourne and Collingwood being so close in the weekend, they've only won 4 of their last 10 games, as has Carlton. So that's on the flip side, the question mark. I would suggest Geelong are right up there. Sydney are a premiership chance. Collingwood, you have to say they're a premiership chance given their form. And then that's before we get to the reigning premiers of the time in in Melbourne, and potentially a Brisbane side that are coming through as well.
So you've got Collingwood a greater chance of a premiership than both Melbourne and Brisbane?
I would suggest that right now Geelong are the premiership favourites.
Yes.
I don't know I'm not looking at the market. I think Geelong are the premiership favourites. I would put Sydney next, and then I reckon you've got Collingwood, Melbourne, and Brisbane all on the same level.
Right, it's a crazy run for Collingwood fans. They could just spurt out these stats, I reckon, off the top of their head. 11 wins on the trot, collective winning margin of 115 points, 10 by 11 points or less, and an average winning margin of 14. That is a ride you might not get again as a supporter ever in a single year. So enjoy it for what it's worth. And having watched them, and enjoyed as much as you can their success, that's as admirable as anything that you could see in recent times. So they just they play Sydney this weekend,
and that will be for a top 4, a guaranteed top 4 berth, and that's going to be an amazing game. And one thing I would say about that, finals is about standing up in the moments when they matter most, and it's isolated contests that actually make the difference. Now, if Collingwood have been able to do that consistently throughout the home and away, they're schooling themselves up to be able to do it at the end.
If Sydney lose to Collingwood, they may almost certainly miss the top 4 to Freo. Okay, I don't do that. It's ladder predictor.
It's a top 4 for contest.
Morning. I want to read this one out.
Yep.
I want to. Where is it? I want to apologise to Nathan. When you declared at the start of the year Collingwood win 15 games, I nearly ran off the road with laughter. So there you go. I just want to read.
Well, they're probably going to win more than that.
Because I also started laughing at
They're probably going to win more than that. Second one I've got is the Paddy Cripps bump, but not just around the discussion that will come from it, but how critical one contest can be in the cause of a flow of a game, in an important game, or even for Carlton in the context of their season. Vossi's attitude is that this is a competitive physical game and we need to be competitive physical players. You get the captain of a side who needs to win, who has been dominated in the early stages of that game, and Vossi would have been in this situation himself a lot. You need to make a stand. You need to change the flow of the contest. And you do that you can do it with an act of brilliance and skill, but the main way is to go harder and lower often than your opponent and win a hard ball. Now, whether Paddy Cripps is seen for this to be a legal action or not, he was a captain trying to make a stand. And for 10 minutes after that, the Carlton side popped up and we saw some real fight. But we didn't see it for long enough in that game against a good opposition. Until the last quarter. So the challenge for Carlton is to rediscover their energy, and I reckon Paddy Cripps' actions were around leadership and trying to drive his group and trying to, with a solid contest at the footy. Now, whether that's validated or not in tribunal.
I understand what you're saying, and we've all played, and you get, that's the state of the game is sometimes they have no Kennedy. They have no Hewitt, and now on the back of that are staring down the chance that they have no Cripps in the two most important games of the year. So, yes, you got to fly the flag, and yes, you got to do all that stuff, and it's easy sitting here in hindsight a day after it. But, it puts them in a parlous position.
And I reckon we're looking at a team whose best form throughout the year is as good as anyone has played. But it's not just about your best; it's about how good your average or your median level is. Thirdly, Lance Franklin and the situation with his contract. I reckon this has been handled in a really mature. It helps when you win the game immediately after, but I think it's been handled in a really mature manner. This player's contributed so much to this team that he's earned the right to play it out and to have the decision in his own grasp to what he wants to do at the end of the year. I love the way that John Longmuir handled that. I love the way that Buddy played. Didn't respond, but the way that he actually fronted and the Swans were able to get the win and Buddy played well.
Damien Barrett called it a provocative statement being released. Kane Corn said it was me. It was a selfish and really strange decision to release that statement.
That frustrates the hell out of me because the same people, and I'm not the same people, which is us, the media, will question whether we've actually asked the question, are we mature enough as an organisation to get to the point where players say, hey, I'm actually going to be heading over here. So say McStay is definitely going to Collingwood. So they actually come out and Daniel McStay says, look, I've had a great time here at Brisbane and I'm going to Collingwood at the end of this season.
Yep.
And Chris Fagan goes, yeah, we're aware of that, but Daniel McStay's in our best side now and he gives us the best chance of playing in a premiership this year. And then we just move on. The people who are the least mature to handle that situation is actually us in the media.
But Daniel McStay's not Buddy Franklin.
No, I know, but I'm just using that as an example.
But anything Buddy says, and I don't mind him coming out and saying it either. But anything he says, he's going to make big.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But that is actually saying that I don't know. I mean, he might be thinking about retirement. We don't know what Buddy Franklin's thinking. We'd like to think we do. And we assume from the utterances of his manager potentially, or any conversations we have at the back, that we know exactly what's going on.
Those boys are talking about the timing of the statement, saying that it's, I understand the timing because he's going to be relentlessly pursued every single time he plays. And Sarah Jones was there again straight after the game, and the week before he was the first player because that's the only access you can really get to him is when they're obligated to do the interview. Yeah. And he just said, oh, well, let's put out a statement. I'm not talking about it again was the statement.
Well, the timing of the statement is in answer to the questions that have been posed through Scuttlebutt over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
I don't know about Scuttlebutt. The story came out at the time when everyone said it was Scuttlebutt, but now it's led to this where he says, hey, there's no future just yet, and I'll work through it at the end of the year. Well,
the other two that are younger players that I reckon are interesting situations is probably De Goey and Rankin. And they're two situations where younger players that probably aren't in the echelon of a Franklin or a Martin who have contributed that heavily to their sides that they've got, that we feel that they've got a right to have a look at their options.
It's a bit more whip hand with De Goey though. The Rankin's a bit, they'd be desperate to keep him, but there's a bit more at play with De Goey and Collingwood, isn't there?
Who's got the whip hand?
Well, that's the point, that the whip hand is debatable.
Potentially, and because there's layers to that, well, then it's a more interesting topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I was Collingwood,
you'd be whipping the hand hard contract.
Line, yeah. A couple of quick ones to finish. Zac Bailey, I just think his importance to the Lions cannot be understated, and in amongst some great players, he had a fantastic game with 4 goals, 20 touches on the weekend. Neil McCluggage, Danaher, Zorko, Andrews, Cameron, but this kid could be, and he's still a kid. Couldn't be, in fact, their most important player. We talk about sort of ground level, top end speed and pace, work rate. He's got class to finish off. When he went off against Richmond, the game totally turned 2 weeks ago. He could well be, they're jack in the pack for the finals. And finally, I needed to address this, and I just thought Brayden, and we've spoken about it already this morning, but Brayden Maynard's tackle and physical presence is something that every team needs going into September and big games in finals, and he definitely produced on the weekend, or Friday night against Melbourne.
He was pretty, and we said to him, "You're pretty happy with yourself?" He said, "Yeah, I think I am."
Oh, well, he had the scratches all over his face.
As we were interviewing him, he just stopped talking to us and just kept watching himself.
Well, he bookended the first tackle on Langdon off the all duck, no dinner comments, and that was, he found himself in the centre square. He was looking for Petrarca, and in the end, Jack Cripps came up from half-back and Brayden Maynard resumed his role. But there may have been something in that about, well, let's see if in the first 30, 40 seconds, because Brayden Maynard is a physical player. He loves making a stand. He plays the game hard and tough. And the tackle against Langdon set it up.
Yep.
And the tackle on Neil Bullen late was the bookend. And wears his heart in his sleeve. Great kid. And built for September.
I like it. Collingwood and Geelong winning 4 and the Cripps bump, which will rage on all day. Maybe it won't. There's not as many people texting in about it as we thought. Maybe it's a bit more cut and dried than we think. Lance Franklin, Zac Bailey, Brayden Maynard. I've got a few to add to that. Tony's in Craigieburn. You can be a caller. Then we'll take a break. I'll come back and talk about a Brisbane side and what they did yesterday. G'day, Tony.
Hey, Gary. G'day, Nathan. I'm a huge fan of yours, mate. Just putting that out there. But just want to know what your thoughts are in hindsight now that after that, I don't really see it as a debacle, but that infamous trade period when we got rid of Phillips, Stevenson and Treloar, I think it was, I didn't think they were the bad decisions at the time, but looking back now, I think we were spot on with those because what we got back has been much more beneficial. I don't know if you saw the Buddy and Stevenson, but what's happened to Stevenson? He seems like a deer in the headlights at the moment. And
Righto, Tone, that's enough. We've got a lot to get through in hindsight.
I think the decisions themselves were sound and they needed to happen due to the situation of the cap. But I think the execution was what got us. It wasn't executed that well. But Steve-O's a young player. He's got some great traits. He's got some things he needs to work on. I don't think anyone at North has really shone in the last couple of years, unfortunately, as they're building. But I won't be tipping on him. He needs some more time.
The ability to time your run towards this year's premiership, I think, is more important than ever, given how close and how even this competition is. Geelong on the weekend got the job done again against St Kilda in pretty impressive fashion. They did it they rested Selwood, they rested blitz halves. They rested blitz halves, and then they made the conservative decision on Dangerfield just before, given that Rowan was already out of that team. That's timing your run for mine. I think they're doing it beautifully. Then you go, okay, who else is Brisbane? Watching that game yesterday with so much on the line, that first half, maybe three quarters, I've had a few doubts about Brisbane. I've looked at it and gone, I'm not sure about their forward line.
Yep.
If they bring heat and pressure like they did in that first half, then they can do something pretty memorable. I'm not saying they can win it, but they smothered Carlton in a way that they just never got into space. And it was all on the back of just at them.
And that's coming from all of the contenders at the moment. Sydney are coming in a rush off the back of their front half pressure.
Yeah.
Brisbane, better performance, front half pressure. Freo have improved their defensive actions, I suppose, the last couple of weeks off the back of front half pressure. Collingwood have been doing it. So the question, Geelong don't rely on it as much. It's all over. It's midfield pressure for them, and it's good defensive structure.
Close and Stengel and the other little
Isaac Smith's not a tackle machine, but he's running. Holmes it's a referred pressure as well. But you're right. It makes teams pop.
So that looked to me finals like, and you know what? If you're a Carlton fan, that was as close to finals intensity that they could expect if they ever got there, and they failed. They just failed the test. Now, the 8 goals in the last quarter is a bit like Essendon's year. As I keep using the analogy, it's the horse that gets back and then flashes home, and you go, "Wow, it doesn't mean anything." Unless you can actually win one. And they didn't. So a lot of pressure on Carlton. They play Melbourne this weekend, a lot at stake there on Saturday night. They'll find out one way or the other. Fremantle, a really good coaching performance from Justin Longmuir on the weekend. So they go and play a side with ball in hand who are as dangerous as anyone. When you play against the Bulldogs, I hate it when they got the ball because they just flip it and run and go. And if they ain't got the footy, they can't do it. They just denied them the ball. Now, Justin said that they didn't necessarily go out that way and want to deny them the footy, but they took what was in front of them, and and the Bulldogs just wouldn't close on them. So they just held the footy and kept the footy.
Well, it doesn't really matter. It does not matter what the coach says. When you take 140 marks, there's a strategy in that. And you've got to take what the opposition give you. But clearly, if you're playing against an opposition that give you something like that, you're going to take it. 140 marks is controlling the footy.
They did, and they were slow to respond, I thought, the Dogs, and couldn't close the gap. And Fremantle were great. And every time that they looked like they were going to just get to within that 2 or 3 goals, they found a way. And I don't know, Sammy Edmund's going to join us in this next half hour. I don't know whether Rory Lobb's going to the Western Bulldogs or not, but he did the greatest impersonation of someone who's saying, hey, look at me on the weekend. And his goal kicking was as pure as you could see.
All outside 50. Amazing.
4 goals from a collective, I reckon, 220 metres.
That's a fair effort, isn't it? And that's the difference. Well, it may be the difference between winning and losing. It's definitely the difference between executing your role and not. He only had seven kicks, 7 disposals for the game, 7 marks, and then 4 straight kicks.
7 big clunkers they were too.
Which, and you don't have to have high numbers or be an accumulator to have high impact on a game. And that is why the argument around sort of key forwards and backs, but a standout performance.
And while we're on it, and this is, I don't want to put pressure on a young kid. Sam Darcy debuted on the weekend. Now, Luke's a mate, and we'll, so you get greater interest and all that sort of stuff. He's 208 centimetres, and he took 5 intercept marks. He took 6 marks. He also hacked it, like he's kicking. He just felt the pressure, which is understandable. But the conversation that we could have had on Saturday as commentators or down the track will be had in 10 years' time.
So you've been massive on Sam de Koning through his time, and this year in particular in regards to Rising Star. How did he look compared to him? Because they seem to have similar attributes and definitely similar size and shape.
Well, on the very small sample, it was very similar. And clearly Luke said, just go for your marks. Because he's playing defence on Tabernar or whoever it was. He just flew into, and his sleight of build and all that, he'll have a summer. But if you're a Dog supporter, he's the most exciting prospect on your list. Come on.
Say that again.
He's the most exciting prospect on your list, Duke. And probably Luke doesn't want that pressure on his young fella, but he looked great.
Well, with Ugle-Hagen down one end and potentially Sam Darcy down the other, and we're talking about a team that hasn't had the key post support or hasn't been flushed with talent there. It's promising going forward.
Carlton fans are not liking the fact that I suggested they failed a test, but you could suggest otherwise. For me, they struggled to handle the heat at all. Essendon, and this is what happens at this time of the year when they're not making finals. Your focus goes on to those who are still in contention, and there was a bit of noise, mate, about the Bombers, they're coming, but they're not. And this is what. It's a nothing year continued. So all of a sudden they'd won a few games, and okay, this could be a positive, and it's going to be good to finish strongly. They play against a side that needed the win and put some work into them, and they failed against the GWS Giants that the week before had been accused of checking out.
So so you're looking at the Bombers side. What did you take from a week down the track about Mark McVeigh's comments and then the response? And all right, so if we put out in a snapshot of the performance last week, the comments after in the post-match press conference, and then obviously the selection, and then the outcome. In that little sample size, what's your take home?
My take home is that they have great respect for Mark McVeigh. That the playing group still have great respect for him, and were disappointed in the way that they conducted themselves the week before, and they wanted to make amends. Because we learned, as jarring as those comments were from Mark, we learned that the players accepted it and were texting him personally and saying, look, we let you down, which is all good and well.
Yep.
Then you've got to see what happens the next week. And Mark McVeigh stuck with them. He could have made a statement at selection, didn't, gave them the chance to redeem themselves. And they did, to some degree.
I think in today's football and the public, clearly the win-loss is your best feedback. But, Buddy Franklin comes out, plays well after those issues, plays well, Sydney win, non-issue. Sydney hadn't won, or it's against North. If Sydney hadn't won that game, there would have been big stories out of it, and we would have said that's the reason they're not winning, whether it was or it wasn't. Mark McVeigh comes out with those comments, GWS lose, then you go, well, something's not right here. Obviously, he's got the players' noses out of joint. There's a lot that can be construed off the back of one performance.
Yep.
So winning solves all ills. So you can push
publicly.
Well, in a small sample size and in short term. So, but it is handling that and the inevitable ups and downs throughout a season is a challenge, but for the GWS, that's a really good week for him.
The MRO, Michael Christian's yet to announce his finding on Cripps' collision with a concussed Callum Archie, but it is certain Cripps will be cited. And it is certain the Blues will fight it, given this is the most important juncture of their season. They need their captain out there with all the injuries on top of it, so you can bet your bottom dollar these are the steps that are going to unfold starting today.
I'll go to the well. I think our audience are the greatest litmus test. They're just hardcore footy. We've had a quarter of the feedback that I thought we'd have on this. I think people think it's a bit cut and dried.
Yeah, maybe it is. So if you put it in the matrix, it's careless, it's high, and it's high. So it's 2 weeks. Archie was concussed. He was subbed out of the game. The Blues, though, have just from their part, seized upon some still images, Gary, that they believe prove Cripps has his eyes on the ball, his arms outstretched, that he was clearly contesting the ball, and that it was reasonable for him to contest the ball in that way. So it's all or nothing. They'll argue it's a football action and an accident, or he gets the 2 weeks.
So it'll go through the matrix and it'll come out around 2, and then there'll be an appeal. That's the logical.
Yeah, Willie Rioli style.
An appeal, and then it gets heard, right? You need to prosecute
at the tribunal.
But you need to prosecute the matrix, right? So why wasn't it careless? Why wasn't it high? You can't say. You can't say it wasn't high impact because he went off. So when does the intent get argued?
Well, so the precedent here is Willie Rioli, but that was a marking contest too. So that was different. That was rough conduct of Matty Rowell. Matty Rowell, I think from my memory, actually played on as well. So if we're talking outcome-based incidents, he played on there. So Collingwood failed to overturn Brayden Maynard. That was the other one. That was a 2-match ban for striking Daniel Lloyd. He did argue, and Collingwood argued he's just trying to spoil the ball.
Yep.
It was careless conduct, high impact, high contact, the same we think that'll be befitting of Patrick Cripps. Lockie Plowman last year, Jager O'Meara, they lost that on appeal, the Blues. That was careless. That was high again. That was 2 weeks. Now, these are all marking aerial contests, but Carlton are going to argue that it was a football act unless they have a change of heart.
Well, the last one, the one that was closest to it, now it was 10 years ago, but it was Zeeble against Carlton themselves. It was on the similar place in the wing, very similar the opposition player coming back with the ball, Zeeble coming towards it, lifted. He got four down to 3. Now, that's fair to say. Well, that's 10 years ago. Can you use that as an act that's similar? But in the last 10 years, are we going for less head contact? Are we looking after the head more?
Oh, we know
now than 10 years ago.
The parameters, the parameters are clear, aren't they? If you
what say you?
I think he's going to get the 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate it's for Carlton, who will go in without him, Matt Kennedy, and obviously George Hewitt potentially in the last fortnight as well. The fallout from the Adelaide camp raged over the weekend. So we saw and heard a full-blown apology from the former coach Don Pike. The lawyer Greg Griffin over there, Gary, saying discussions are taking place over class action. Nothing formal yet, but just merely discussions up to 7 players involved in that, the lawyer Greg Griffin says. Now, I can tell you that the Adelaide board met on Saturday morning to discuss its next course of action over what many former players are describing as the most shameful chapter in the club's history. Now, there's a lot of pressure on a club great Mark Rasciuto there as the footy director, his ongoing position at the club, given he has been among the strongest defenders of the camp with a previously very stern, nothing to see here mentality. But those close to him say he is absolutely defiant, Gary. He's determined not to step down no matter the pressure that comes his way. So the Crows board sat down on the same day that Don Pike apologised and acknowledged that the hurt the camp had caused, admitting their feelings that information that the players had provided was used against them was disappointing and unacceptable. Now, that's a fair difference from that famous 2018 press conference when he said, "I don't believe we've offended any Indigenous players. I wouldn't have thought the players felt betrayed, and I'm not going to apologise for us trying to get better." So that was 4 years ago. Certainly, and good on him. He's come a full 180 there, Don Pike. So the AFL have ticked it off. Safe Work SA have tipped it off. Greg Griffin did say, though, this was another example of the AFL marking its own homework and giving itself an A+ and everyone wearing it. So we wait to see where it goes next.
Are you suggesting, or not suggesting, but is there pressure on Mark Rasciuto
I think there is.
As the footy director?
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, I think there's some elements of the club as well that are applying that pressure as well. But as I say, he's absolutely determined to continue.
If we separate what actually happened at the camp from the way that it was handled afterwards, is Mark Rasciuto as the football director, do you think he's responsible and accountable for the camp itself?
What happened on it?
Yes.
No.
So he can't be held accountable for that, but he can be held accountable for the communication and the handling of it post. And
But,
he and
the
others,
club.
he and other leaders at the club.
Yeah, so we've heard from Eddie Betts, Josh Jenkins, Bryce Gibbs, and maybe some more to come formally. But privately, a lot of the famous alumni at that footy club are words to that effect. Proper process didn't occur. Issues that a lot of these guys have is that the affected players were silenced and that they didn't feel safe raising the issues when they had them. And history say they were right to be concerned, the players, given those who did speak up at the time were ostracised. So I think that probably summarises the chief concern among former players at that club, the conversations that are happening privately at the moment. An otherwise sleepy VFL game at Arden Street yesterday had one club champion make a successful return, another having potentially played the last game of his career. So Ben Cunnington, first time in 370 days, 2 bouts of cancer treatment. Looked good too down at Arden Street. Wasn't good news for Josh Kennedy. Limped off with what appears another bad hamstring injury. Hasn't played since round 10 after that nasty tear against the Blues. He was the Medi sub against GWS last week but didn't feature. So that's a watch this space. We await word on Dan Hanbury's ankle as well, Nick Vlosten's ribs, and Patrick Dangerfield, who missed the win over the Saints after he had that what was described as low-level calf tightness while warming up. So he's going to be scanned as well. That could be a real concern for the Cats. We'll see where that goes.
Josh Kennedy, career?
Well, it could be. I mean, it could
There's
be.
no statement on that.
No statement on that, and no outcome on the scans as yet. But, I mean, you'd think that's season over at a minimum. AFL clubs bemused. This is a quirky one by an AFL crackdown, guys, on the uploading of COVID test results before games. So it's the Vax Vault that the AFL use is the app. Whether it's crashed or results aren't being uploaded or a bit of sloppiness maybe has crept in. This has flared over the last week, and the AFL is demanding that some club staff attend one-on-one integrity meetings with their integrity officials because the results haven't been uploaded correctly. Each player and every coach before the game has to upload these results, whether they're positive or whether they're negative. So the clubs are saying, geez, this is like getting a jail sentence for outstaying your parking spot.
In light of what's been going on.
Unbelievable.
And the failures along the way.
They can't get their heads around it. I mean, the coaching fraternity feel it's another kick in the guts for a section of the industry that already feels it's carried. The lion's share of the COVID load has been kicked when it's down. So it's an incredible situation here for clubs who are just throwing their arms up. Like, we have 40 strangers in the rooms after a game. We don't know their Vax history.
The level of compliance that AFL clubs are asked to adhere to for the AFL is mind-boggling. You talk after Essendon, the supplement stuff, and every player every week needed to sign off on what they hadn't had. So the level was over. The whereabouts that are required from WADA and ASADA, that was complied with the AFL, and you need to every second of every day the club need to know where their players are, and if you don't get that right, you get fined. The soft cap cuts on the football department are going to have an effect. And sometimes it might actually be that the person whose job it is to do all that is actually now doing 2 or 3 other jobs.
Less resources and asked to do more.
Correct. Is the Vax compliance different to that we are experiencing at the Commonwealth Games?
Oh, what about this? So the Australian women's cricket team, they're ODI world champions, they're T20 world champs, and now Commonwealth Games gold medalists. That's great. They held off India overnight, and it was dramatic at the end, but that was almost matched, Gary. And I know what you're alluding to here, the situation that enveloped the Aussie all-rounder Talia McGrath, who actually tested positive for COVID the morning of the match. Now, despite that positive test, she was allowed to play with the full support of the ICC, the Australian Commonwealth Games team, and the Commonwealth Games Federation. Now, there are reports that the Indian team was not told that McGrath had tested positive until the toss of the coin, and that would cause the delay of 10 minutes for the start of the match.
Hang on. So the Indian team ready to play in a gold medal match, and the ump wanders up and says, by the way, one of these Aussie girls is COVID positive.
As per the reports, that's exactly how it's played out, and that they'd wanted McGrath to be stood down. Now, she was seen on camera with the pads on getting ready to bat in another stand. So isolated away from her teammates with a mask and the pads on, and she did come out to bat.
So clearly. Was this across the board over there? Like, if you're in the morning of a cycling race, could you say, listen, I've just come back with the old one line on the old test here, but can I have a ride?
I can't speak for the Commonwealth Games, but it's not unprecedented over in Europe. I mean, the Tour de France just was run and won, and there were 2 or 3 riders who tested positive and were allowed to continue in a close sport like that because they had, Gary, low viral load. So maybe that's just the attitude's a little bit different over there, but extraordinary.
So is it so shocking or do we actually look back and go, well, for the last couple of years, we've been kidding ourselves with the way that we've tried to set up
I
society?
think there's probably a fair element of that too.
Well, it depends. If there's an Indian cricket player that's got a respiratory problem that's highly
Yeah, fair
susceptible
point.
to COVID, and all of a sudden you go, hey,
But if we made legislation on the worst case scenario for everything, we'd be all wrapped up in cotton wool and we'd never leave home.
No,
Right?
well, we did. That's exactly what we did.
Yeah, I didn't have cotton wool on me.
For 2 years, that's exactly what we did. We locked the joint down because we had
Bubble wrap.
8 positives.
You reckon the Paddy Cripps situation gets debated? Don't
Well,
go down this
how
path,
laughable
please.
that's how laughable it is. But anyway.
Field, outstanding work. I will need you just to do one bit of homework given the amount of texts that are coming through here.
Far away.
2 names, 2 words. Ollie Henry.
Yes, very close.
Homework
Yeah,
for us?
it's underway. We've spoken about that. I think it's going to happen. Dan McStay coming in, though, has just given him pause for thought, but I think they're going to get there.